Hello, everyone. My name is always Asmal. Welcome to another episode of Tooways to Skin a Cat, a show where we talk career experiences, entrepreneurship, and investments. The main aim is to show that there's more than one way to be successful other than just climbing the corporate ladder. Now, we are live on LinkedIn and YouTube, and the show will be available on podcast by tomorrow. If you're joining me live, drop a one in the comments so that I know I'm not talking to myself. And if you are watching the recording, drop a two in the comments. Today, I'll be talking about preparing for your first year of articles, or as it's referred to these days, the first year of your training contract to qualify as a chartered accountant. Now, I'll have separate sessions for second year and third year, but I wanted to delve deep into year one specifically. Now, I'll be speaking about the 3 year contract journey because that's the one that I went through. If you're doing a 4 year or a 5 year contract, there may be other nuances, but it'll probably have similarities, especially in the first year. So if you have questions about where you should do articles, I've done a separate video on this a while back. I'll try and add this link to the sessions in the comments, but you can always just search on YouTube if you want to find it, but I'll try to add it in the comments afterwards as well. Anyways, let's get into it. So some firms will give you the option to choose which department you'd like to join. So say, for example, it's financial services, banking, or mining, or information and communication, or consumer markets. And it can be difficult to choose which department if you have no idea what each one is about. And especially if you're in a big city like Johannesburg, there's a lot more departments. Cape Town and might have a little bit less departments. And if you're in a small town or in a town, there might be everything in one, especially if you're working for a big firm. Now, my advice for you is if you don't know which department to choose, is when you're at university, try to do vac work, vacation work in different departments. A lot of the big four audit firms offer the opportunity for university students to do vac work, and that's a good idea to learn about audit, get a feel for what it's like, and also a feel for the department. I did vac work in the financial services department, and immediately I knew after that those type of clients and that type of work didn't suit my personality. So I immediately chose another department. Now, if you are not from the city that you are now going to be working in or you're expected to be working in, finding a place to stay can be tricky and expensive. And I don't have a lot of experience here because I was lucky enough to find a firm in my home city. I will say that your third year, your second year, and your third year colleagues will be able to share good advice on what worked for them and why. So this might save you a lot of money and a lot of stress. So chat to them. Let's talk about starting. So your very first week of work. In most cases, it's likely to be training. Unless it's a mad deadline, you're likely to have to start the training. If you've just written your board exam, I'm sure the last thing you want to do is learn more. But the training can help you a lot. So at least try to take it or take as much in as you can. Getting training in things like Word, Excel, PowerPoint will help you for the rest of your career. So don't take it lightly. To this day, I help my colleagues with something they've been struggling for hours with a simple VLOOKUP that takes 5 minutes. And that's just because of the training that I got during my articles. Yes, some of you might have the training in varsity, and that's great, but not everybody does. If your firm does not offer formal training, it will be up to you to find training. Maybe you could convince your firm to pay for it or search for free training online. It's a lot more available now than it was in the past. You might find good training for, let's say, 250 Rand to 500 Rand. And I know that can be a lot of money for a first year or on a first year salary, but it will be worth it. Now, after training, when you start doing your actual audit work for the very first time, it can seem daunting. It might be the first time you're dealing with working papers in the form that your new firm expects you to work. So you might have seen it, you might have done some working papers during articles, during varsity, as they would do it at university, but it might be the first time that you're using the software that your firm uses. So what do you do? A good tip is establish a good relationship with the second or third year on the client that you're working with. This will go a long way to helping you to do your work properly and learning and growing. These colleagues and your manager and your partner are your first real opportunity to set up a professional network. So that's establishing, and networks are going to be key in your career from the time that you start. It might not seem as important, and it's maybe not as important at the beginning. It's still important, but it's really important as more senior you get in your career, and you can leverage off those relationships that you set up early in your career if you make strong connections with your colleagues and with those above you. On the other hand, if if you make your senior colleagues' lives difficult, then don't expect them to help you. Don't expect them to connect with you. Don't expect it. So try to make sure you get on well with your colleagues and try to learn from them. Try to establish good relationships with your peers who are at the same level as you. You might think, oh, I need to impress my manager, or I need to impress my boss, or things like that. But establish good relationships with your peers. Those good relationships and connections will stay with you for the rest of your career. A big regret of mine was not making better connections with my peers. I had good connections with some, and I wish I had made a bigger effort to have more connections. Um, I'll be responding to questions towards the end if you do have any questions. So please add your questions to the comment section now so that I make sure I don't miss them. Let's go back to talking about the actual work. So some work is designated for first years. First years have been doing it for the last 10 years, 20 years. Um, and you will likely do that first before you do anything else. Now, some people are overachievers and they like to be the best at everything and they want to shine at the difficult work. And that's perfectly fine. However, you first need to prove that you can do your own work. And you need to be able to prove that you can do your own work well before putting up your hand for more complex or more exciting work. When you start working, bank reconciliations might seem like simple work, but I still use that to this day. Bank reconciliations. It sounds simple, and you think it's simple, but you'd be surprised. I use it to this day. As you get more experience, don't be afraid to take on more difficult work. Put your hand up and try to work, or put your hand up to try and work. That is, taking on work that is normally allocated to a second year. Got a little bit of word salad there, but yeah, put your hand up once you've gotten more experience. Try and take on more work if you have the capacity. Now, again, going back to starting a new job, is if this is the first time you are having a full-time job, or it's the first time you're working corporate for the first time, don't expect to get used to it immediately. It can take some time to get used to sitting at a desk for 8 to 11 hours a day. It can take time to settle into a new reality. I remember that I only felt that I belonged after about, let's say, 6 months of working. The funny thing is that even if you're not allocated to a client and you have no work, they call it being idle in audit. You still have to come to work and sit at your desk. And after that day of sitting at your desk and doing nothing, or wasting time, it still feels like you've worked a full day and you will still be tired after, even if you didn't do any work. I can still remember that was such a surprise to me because I was like, I didn't do any work. Why am I tired? But it takes effort to come into work. It takes effort to be present. It takes effort to not fall asleep at your desk. Another thing to try and work on is learning to communicate in a professional environment is not talked about enough, but it can make a massive difference to how you are perceived. An email that you send with a wrong tone can reflect negatively on you. And the problem is that no one teaches us how to communicate in a professional environment. We have to learn from our mistakes. So that's why I'm trying to talk to you about it now. I've unintentionally damaged relationships with managers in the past without realizing it. And after realizing my error, I apologized and explained. But if I had known how to be an effective communicator before, it would have saved me so much anguish. It would have made my life much easier. A good book to read is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That book helped me tremendously in terms of trying to put myself in another person's shoes and communicating with him. Now, sticking with the first year, in my first year of articles, it was also my first introduction to ratings meetings. And that's where they rate you after you've done a job, whether you've finished an audit job or some other job where you've worked with a team or you worked on your own. They normally rate you after each job. And those rating meetings can be tricky. It's not always black and white. it can have a lot to do with your relationship with the person who is rating you. So that's why I'm saying, I'm not saying you should do sloppy work. I'm saying do your work well, but also have a good relationship with your manager and your partner. In some audit firms, they partner you with a manager and a director or a partner who's supposed to help you grow during your contract, your training contract. I think they call it a performance manager, or no, it's not a performance manager. It's a I can't get to the word right now, but they're supposed to help you in your career. And depending on who they link you up with, it can help. And sometimes it doesn't help at all. So if they, and that just depends on who they link you up with. So if they happen to link you up with a manager or a director who's not helpful, giving up is not an option. Find a way to learn from a more helpful manager or senior colleague who you can relate to. But more importantly, will fight for you in ratings meetings that managers have when they discuss trainees. Because managers and partners get together and they discuss, there's official meetings where they discuss the ratings of trainees. And you need someone who will be willing to fight for you in that room to get yourself a good rating. Otherwise, you're not going to get good ratings. You might just get average ratings, which is not the end of the world, but you don't want bad ratings. And people with higher ratings get higher increases. So that's just a fact. Something to also think about is establishing good relationships with your clients. So chances are you might be working on the same client for 3 years. You're going to be in the same audit, generally speaking. Those clients are also potential job opportunities for you when you leave articles. So you have the ability to have a very strong network by the end of your articles if all you do is have good relationships with your peers, your manager, your partner, and your clients. I wouldn't suggest networking further than that, but if you do the minimum, that's the minimum. Something that I recommend on all your clients, and it sounds simple and it sounds obvious, but people don't do it, is try to understand how your client makes money. If you understand that, you can move into any business after article. Some people, they're like, okay, these are the procedures I need to do, tick, 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 tick. But they don't actually understand how the business makes money. So try to make sure you understand how the business makes money, how the business runs. Now, if you are doing articles outside of audit, so you're doing articles in corporate or in government, um, they sometimes move you around to different departments. And similar to establishing good relationships with your clients, if you're in audit, establish good relationships with the people in those departments that they move you to. It's also a good space to get an understanding of what they do in that department. And if you like that department, you might end up there after articles if that's something you're interested in. So establish good relationships, get a good understanding of how the departments work. Let's talk a little bit about annual leave. Most of you will be on contract, so you only have access to, say, 15 days of annual leave a year. And 15 days is not a lot. So this is where you need to use your public holidays wisely so that you get the most bang for your buck in terms of days off. So April, May, when it's Easter and Freedom Day and Workers' Day, is a good time. And obviously December, those periods are normally great for us for making the most out of your public holidays and the most out of your annual leave. You must take time off to avoid burnout. If you can afford to, I always recommend going on holiday outside of the city that you work in. The reason I say that is because if you stay in the city, even if you took 2 or 3 weeks off, it just feels like a long weekend because you are in your same surroundings that you are in every day, other than being at work. As if you go away, even if you just go away for a long weekend, because you are in a completely different space, it can feel like a long holiday. So try and do that if when you're taking leave. Having a coach and having mentors has helped me a lot in terms of building myself and learning from these things and learning from these mistakes. Remember that learning about yourself is crucial, and that does take time, but don't be afraid to make mistakes and don't be afraid to try different things to test out what you enjoy and what you don't. I don't see any questions, so I think that's where we will end today. In closing, I want to leave you with that one message that I like to leave. Remember, this is your life. You are responsible for it. If you want to succeed, it's on you. You can blame other people for you not succeeding, but the only person it's going to negatively affect is you. So take charge of your growth, take charge of your life. Remember, the final decision is always yours. Even if you make the wrong decision, you can learn from it and still succeed. The show has been live on YouTube and should be available on podcast by tomorrow. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast and you feel that it's added value, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click on that notification bell to get automatically notified when the next episode comes out. Thanks so